There is one sandwich that stands out as the most incredible sandwich of all time. Now, you may not be as concerned about this like I am, but for most of us who are sandwich eaters, there is one that transcends all time. Now, to my friends in Tampa, they may say, well, the Cuban sandwich is the greatest sandwich of all time, but that's kind of a niche sandwich, isn't it? Or maybe to my all-American friends, they may say the cheeseburger. Now that's the greatest sandwich of all time. Well, what do you do with all the condiments? I mean, do you have mayo or not? Ketchup, tomato, onion, lettuce, pickles? Which pickles would you want? I mean, it's just too complicated. That's why the greatest sandwich of all time is the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I mean, clearly. I mean, for me, peanut butter and jelly sandwich, that would be sourdough bread, lightly toasted with Smucker's strawberry jam, heavily layered across one side. And then on the other side, you would take Jif chunky peanut butter. That way it has the sweetness and the crunch of a great sandwich. Now, honestly, I'm probably making more of this than I need to, but there is an inseparable reality, an inseparable truth that goes together. That's why people say it goes together like peanut butter and jelly, like cats and dogs and salt and pepper, light and dark. These two pieces contrast and find their place together in the truth of the greatest sandwich of all time. It's very similar in many ways for the follower of Jesus and the love of Jesus, that there is an inseparable truth that some of us may call the Great Command. There was that moment when Jesus was teaching among some people, and a guy decides to interject himself and ask a question. What's the greatest commandment of all time? And so Jesus begins to respond to that question. But the question isn't just to figure out his opinion or to get his idea on teaching. It is actually to measure the merit of his heart and understanding about Hebrew law. And so Jesus, with some banter with this apprentice, this student, this expert of the law, he begins to just say, well, it's just simply this. In Mark chapter 12, it would be read this way: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is like this, to love your neighbor as yourself. There is no greater commandment than these. I mean, it's this truth of loving God and loving people, right? That when we love God fully, we can love others freely. Let me say that again. When we love God fully, we can love others freely. It's an inseparable truth. It's a 1 and a 1A. They cannot be apart from each other. To love God fully means to love others, and to love others freely means it comes from the heart of God. I mean, think about this for a moment. Jesus is beginning to answer this critic, this person who is measuring his heart and his teaching, and he kind of leans in for this moment, and he doesn't just answer it quickly. He actually engages a bit of dialogue. And he begins with this idea of we are called to love God fully with our heart, mind, body, and spirit. That loving God fully means that we give everything, or that we receive all that God has given us so that we can give to others freely. A love that is like Jesus. Jesus who gave up his position and power, as Philippians 2 would tell us, that he gave up his right towards privilege and surrendered his life in a way that he lived a pure and blameless life, so that ultimately, being fully God and fully man, he might surrender his life as the sacrifice, as the payment for our sin, and to provide the gift of everlasting life. We recognize that our identity in who we were created to be is built on this foundation, that God so loved, he gave his love freely to a world that in many ways is the enemy to him, that we had rebelled and fought for our own will and way. And God desired to restore, to reconcile, to redeem and bring those relationships back together so that we might be able to live for God's glory and for the world's blessing. It's an inseparable truth. The truth is not fully realized until we accept God's love, then we can begin to apply it to the people around us. At home and at work and at play, we have a privilege to live out this love before others publicly. But there is a personal experience for each and every one of us to receive God's love. We have a chance to look at the people around us differently because of how God has looked at us. God did not push us aside, but moved towards us so that we might know his love and his care for each and every one of us. In other words, loving God and loving people are the inseparable truth. To fully love God is to freely love others. And this is from the nature and goodness of God, that when we have accepted that, it goes into full bloom in our lives so that we overflow with goodness to the people around us. To fully love others is to love them as God loves them, with dignity and honor and respect, that we would address every person, from the neighbor to the friend to the family member to the stranger. We would treat all of them with the love that God has given to us. Why? Because when we love God fully, we can love others freely. I mean, here's the challenge. It all begins, though, with our walk with God, fully loving God with all that we are. That's what Jesus says, with our heart, mind, body, and our soul, that we would surrender our total selves in the love of Jesus. But here's what happens. For some of us, I think we tend to gravitate towards one area of emphasis in our followership, in our walking with God in his love. I think some of us are prone to follow God mostly with our mind, right? We want to gain more knowledge. We want to gain more understanding. And so there's this danger that if we only pursue God with our mind, only what we can learn, we have a tendency to become somewhat legalistic, almost pharisaical, that we become about the do's and don'ts and the rules and regimens rather than living in the freedom that God has called us towards. At the same time, if we only pursue God with our heart, we are prone to our own emotions and relationships around us. We rise and fall on the roller coaster of life based on how things are going with our friends or coworkers. We rise and fall by the way that we feel or what we enjoy or what we like. And so when hard times come, our heart can be incredibly low. And we can find ourselves being driven, when we only love God from our heart, riding the pace and the rhythm of the emotions and relationships and experiences around us. Truth of the matter is, though, if we only love God with our body, we can become the kind of people that we get focused on all that we do and all that we offer. We may leverage our lives towards a great cause, but we begin to value our identity on what we produce. And God didn't create us as transactional beings to just think more or feel more or do more. God created us with a soul, the entire eternal being of who we are, that we would express our public life in the ways that we think and act and feel, that we would do a life that's built out of the being that God has created us to be, an eternal identity built in our relationship with Jesus. And so when we recognize that we were separated from God and that we have received his goodness through the death, the burial, and resurrection of Jesus, that we have been redeemed and restored into the likeness of Jesus through his death, burial, and resurrection, we give our lives in a way that we also surrender. We put to death the old way of living to now walk in a new life with Jesus, so that love is fully expressed in us and freely given to people around us. See, when we love God fully, we can love others freely. The truth is, when we accept God's love as intended, we apply God's love rightly to ourselves and then to each other. Now, this has the potential to transform all of the people around us. This has the potential to change our relationships. We don't value our relationships by what we gain from others, but we begin to honor and see each other as God would see us. We can rest in the security of who God is and what God has done and who God has created us to be. We find ourselves accepted and known and valued and loved because of the great sacrifice of Jesus. God has our very best in mind, and God has placed others in our lives so that we might be mindful of them. Collectively, we might experience God's love fully and then freely love others as well. But let me just confess for a moment what happens when we begin to live a life for ourselves rather than the life of surrender back to Jesus. What happens when we're not loving God fully and not able to love others freely? I have a propensity to build my identity out of what I do or what I produce or what I get done. And when I was in college, I had the privilege to go to the Dominican Republic. And the Dominican Republic is an incredibly beautiful country. But like every country, there is great wealth and there's great poverty. And so we were given the opportunity to go and be a part of a mission trip. And a good friend had invited me to be a part of this trip, but I had never been there before. And so stepping out of the country and taking an opportunity to go serve those who may be disadvantaged in some ways, may be marginalized in some ways, may not have the opportunity to experience God the way we have experienced God here in the Midwest, I kind of went with this heart of, I can do something about this. I can give something. I can make a difference for my own life. After a few days and the heat starting to cook in a little bit and the generosity of these people just going above and beyond to make sure that we were cared for and that we were supplied our every need while we were actually building a church building in this community. But my temper was getting short and my tongue was getting harsh, and I was getting to a point where I was just over it all. And the leader, we'll call him Brooke because that's his name, but Brooke kind of grabbed me and says, "Hey, Schaffner, can we go chat?" And so we go around the corner and we find a little curb stop to sit at. And he just began to ask me, "Hey, what's going on? What seems to be playing out?" And I tell some story about how I really want to make a difference. And it just feels like we're lugging cement around, or we're taking these cinder blocks and stacking them. And, we're not going to see it get finished. We're not going to see it done. And I'm just complaining about, here I am. I'm ready to do something big. And all I'm doing is lugging this cement. The truth is, the work was hard. We were working with our hands and filling it in buckets and carrying it over these areas and crevices. And, it was a bit of manual labor that was beyond my norm. And Brooke was just really compassionate. He was grateful that I was there to serve. But he said, I just want to share something with you. I want you to think about this. He goes, I've done these trips for a bit and had all sorts of different people come and serve in these different ways. And, sometimes we get this picture in our mind of what it's supposed to be or what we're going to do or how it's going to play out. And he says, if I can be honest, sometimes people load up coming to an area like this, expecting to come and see poverty or find poverty. And when they come to find poverty, where they find it is in their own heart. I'm going to tell you, I wish that I completely understood everything that he was saying in that moment, but it hit me like a bus. It was as if God grabbed me by the shirt and just said, "Listen here, big boy, let's pay attention to this." I'm not loved because of what I do. I'm loved because I'm created in the image of God. And God's love for me was great when I was his enemy, and it's just as great when I'm his friend. And God's desire for me to know his goodness and his love is for me to surrender my life in a way fully to him so that the rest of the world would also see his love, not only through creation or through his acts of sovereignty, but through his people. See, the truth of the matter is, for each and every one of us, when we love God fully, we can love others freely. So what does it look like for you to lean in to loving God with all that you are and all that you have? And who is it, or where is it, that God might be pressing in you today to go live that life of love freely, without strings attached, without personal expectations, but just to give as Jesus gave his life of love for you? When we love God fully, we can love others freely.